What the hell happened? What happened to your song? What happened to the theme? Well, that sometimes happens when you're live, and that's the theme to the Incredible Hulk television show that ran on CBS. Well, what time is it? It's Podblast time! That's right, it's Podblast time with a very special edition because we have an incredible, no pun intended, special guest who will be with us today. No matter how old or young you are, you've seen this man's impressive and iconic Emmy Award-winning television programs and his artistry. Kenneth Johnson is the best-selling author of numerous books, including his brand new book that we'll talk about today. And his past books, which sold very, very well and are very well written, are titled The Man of Legends and The Darwin Variant, among other novels that he's written. Of course, you probably know him as the successful writer, producer, director of many film and television projects. Kenneth Johnson is the creator of the critically acclaimed landmark TV miniseries V, about the aliens who attempt to take over our planet. And Kenneth also produced The $6 Million Man, and he created the iconic Emmy Award-winning series The Bionic Woman, The Incredible Hulk, and the show Alien Nation on Fox. He's the recipient of multiple Saturn Awards from the Academy of Science Fiction. And these days, Kenneth lives in Southern California with his wife, Susan. His website, by the way, is kennethjohnson.us. And I must say, he's extremely kind to his many fans. And he will write you back if you send him a message. And his contact info is right there on the website. But his latest book, and there's an audiobook version, is published by Blackstone Publishing. Go to blackstonepublishing.com and pick up his latest novel titled Holmes Coming. And I'm going to give him a buzz and talk with the great Kenneth Johnson as we're live here on the Nostalgic Podblast. One ringy dingy. Two ringy dingies. Mr. Johnson, hi, it's Chance Bartels, the Nostalgic Podblast. How are you today?
I am fine, Chance. I was just sending you an email to say, are we still on? And I'm glad to see that we are. So there we go.
I'm sorry I was a little late, which our regular viewers know is a unfortunate standard occurrence. Well, I was just telling everyone about your new book titled Holmes Coming, which is about Sherlock Holmes. And it's a very interesting plot. It's a crime mystery. Would you elaborate on what the story's about without giving too much away?
Sure. It's a really sort of a comedic mystery thriller kind of combination. I've always been a big fan of a lot of the 19th century writers, like Victor Hugo and Robert Louis Stevenson and Jules Verne and all. And I was reading Conan Doyle story a few years ago, and suddenly I flashed on this idea. I mean, Sherlock Holmes has been done to death by so many people in so many different manifestations and ways, and modern and all that sort of stuff. But I realized that nobody had really ever gone back and drawn the original character, or the man that was known as Sherlock Holmes, up into what if he suddenly reappeared in the 21st century, and still the same, eccentric, egocentric, cocaine addict, sexist, and all of those things that he was in all of Doyle's original canon. But now here he is in this new world, and which he's gotten into on his own, because being a master chemist, the man who was known as Sherlock, figured out a way to sort of hibernate himself and awaken 100 years later, where he could solve some of the mysteries of the future, perhaps, because he was kind of bored with what was going on in Victorian London at the time. has reappeared, and he's still all of the same guy that he was for good and bad, but he's also 100 years out of sync. So unfortunately, his brilliant deductions, while often still brilliant, are sometimes just a little off center and skewed by the way that things have changed since then. And the fact that his as he awakens and his life is saved by Dr. Amy Winslow, he is immediately astonished that a doctor, a female, really, So it's a delightful sort of fish out of water story that gets into a little spark of romance as well as all of that. But before I wrote it, I really sat back and sat down and read the whole canon of Conan Doyle, because I really wanted to make sure that the fans of the original Sherlock character would be caught up and drawn into the piece, and so I was really determined to make as much of the dialogue as possible be actual lines that Conan Doyle had written for Holmes before. But the one problem I faced, Chance, when I sat down with enthusiasm to sort of jump into this writing, and suddenly I realized, wait a minute, I'm writing for a character who is a genius. How does one write for a genius when one, like me, is definitely not a genius, And
I disagree.
Oh, well, bless your heart. But I was really stymied for a moment until I realized that in my research I had discovered that Conan Doyle felt exactly the same way, that it was just so hard to write. That's actually why he killed Sherlock off after the first 25 stories, because it was just too damn hard to write. But then the public outcry was so huge, and his other more serious works, as he referred to them, were not quite so well received as Sherlock had been. So he went back and brought him back to life, much the same way that I brought the Bionic Woman back to life after the studio and network had made me kill her off originally.
Right.
So it's a lot of fun. It takes place in contemporary San Francisco, and Holmes quickly discovers that he has been, in fact, pursued there by the minions of his late nemesis, Moriarty. And in addition to that, there are some interesting new crimes going on in San Francisco that he and Amy get drawn into, and so it's a piece that I'm very proud of. And so far, the reviews and the reader reviews have been excellent as well, and I'm hoping that people will give it a try.
I noticed the positive reviews, and of course, it can be found through BlackstonePublishing.com, Amazon, everywhere.
Yeah, that's true, and Amazon's probably the best and quickest place to get it. It's also a place where people can leave their own reader reviews when they after they've read the book. Oh, only if they like it, Otherwise, don't bother. But and one other just quick note too about the book. We also did an audio book version of it, and Blackstone's originally thought was, well, we'll just have Amy Winslow and one voice actress tell the whole story. And I said, gee, no, I don't think that's going to work. You're going to have an American woman doing back and forth dialogue for pages and pages with a Victorian male Brit. It's going to be stupid, basically. Right. And finally they agreed, and we brought in the brilliant Rory Barnett to do the voice of Holmes, plus several of my other favorite actor friends to fill out the rest of the voices. I did a few of them myself, because the light goes on in the refrigerator when I open it, and suddenly I feel like I need to do 20 minutes, So it's an audio book that is really unlike anything that's been done, particularly because normally, when you record an audio book or an animated movie or something, you got one character at a time in the booth, and what we did was we linked all of our actors together over 8 time zones spread across 5 cities, and everybody could hear everybody else, so they could really play it as though it was a theatrical play, and it makes a huge difference in the way that actors perform, obviously.
I love audiobooks. That sounds like a real treat. Congratulations on your new book.
Thank you.
Also for the recent 45th anniversary of the debut of The Incredible Hulk, which you brought to television screens.
Couldn't possibly have been 45 years. I don't feel like I can't be old enough for it to be 45 years ago. But thank you for that. And yeah, it has been quite a to-do. A lot of people have talked about it, and I was just yesterday at doing a eulogy for Tom Reba, who was my special effects wizard on the Bionic Woman and the Hulk, and then later on V as well. And it gave me an opportunity to sort of reflect on what it was like to have all worked together, and had so much fun doing those shows. And the relationship that I had with Bix from the very beginning was wonderful. And to me, and I still get just tons and tons and tons of email all the time from people who say, I saw the Incredible Hulk when it first started. I was 8 or 9 years old, and now I'm looking at it much later in my life, and as it's come out now on Blu-ray and everything, and they say, wow, there were some really good adult things going on, which is exactly what I was striving for from the very, very beginning, and it's really rewarding to hear that something that was struck to life 45 years ago is still really cooking along and engaging audiences, and it's incredibly rewarding.
It holds up to this day, and even the bell bottoms have come back. So
that's what I always enjoy saying. Yes, even with the bell bottoms, it's funny, when I did V in the 1980s, in '82. I was very careful to steer away from anything that skewed of bell bottoms or anything that I think there's only a couple of places even where 80s hair, that women will recognize that term, that 80s hair that a lot of women had, the Farrah Fawcett kind of, but we try to avoid everything that wasn't sort of a classic kind of feel, so that V would still stand the test of time, and people wouldn't say, yeah, I love V, but those bell bottoms. But what they do say is, oh, I love V, but the original V, but boy, some of those special visual effects were not so great, and my frustration is that I knew that at the time, that we couldn't make things look the way that I wanted them to look, and it was a great frustration. But I think the thing that's made both the Hulk and V hang on for as long as it has are the emotional structure that I tried to build into both of them, and the character development and the relationships and the humanity that I was always trying to stress. And it's wonderful that all that stuff. I mean, V is coming up on its 40th anniversary next year, and it's just such a delight to see that audiences still are discovering it, and who weren't born, or whose parents in some cases weren't born when I did the original work, and it makes a guy really proud, I got to tell you.
And all of those great shows are available on Blu-ray, and you've done audio commentaries for most of the key episodes, certainly the ones you wrote and directed, of The Bionic Woman, The Incredible Hulk. $6 Million Man is also, Shout Factory, by the way, released The Bionic Woman recently on Blu-ray in 2022. And there's a lot of great audio commentary. You learn a lot from Kenneth Johnson's commentaries, especially if you're a film or television buff like myself. He goes into great detail. It's always a great listen.
Yeah, it's funny. Before I did the first one I ever did was for V, when we did the Blu-ray, the original DVD release of V. And before I did it, I said, I'm going to see who else is doing stuff like this and what it's like. And I remember looking at the ones that Ronnie Howard did for Apollo 13 and that Ridley did for the first Alien, and they were really wonderful. But I also listened to a lot of other ones where the commentator would just be saying, well, yeah, here he's moving from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen, and I'm going, yeah, duh, I can see that. Tell me about what's going on. So whenever I do those commentaries, I sit down with a sheaf of notes so that I can remember the names of everybody, remember the locations we were shooting in, and what the problems were. Because I figure if somebody's going to take the time to listen, boy, they should be entertained for the whole run of the thing. And the mistake I made was on the original V commentary. I gave an email address where people could write if they had comments or questions. Oh, well, beware what you wish for, and because they just have never stopped coming in, and I have reams and reams of 4-inch binders with so many of them that we've saved. But the great thing about that is, Chance, that it's like being in a room with your audience because you're really getting one-on-one feedback from people, and I do my very best to try to answer every one of the emails that I get.
You
I
sure
fall
do.
behind. I fall behind occasionally, but then I try to rush to catch back up again because I really appreciate the fans' feedback and hearing what they liked or what they missed or what they'd like to see again, and so I'm really glad that I did that. And now, of course, I have a website which I didn't have back then, and where people can check in and see what's going on. Just KennethJohnson.us, just my name, one word, .us. Will take people to my website, and it's managed to keep people up to speed, including the fact that there is a new Short Circuit 2 Blu-ray out. It's out in the UK already. And Sony Pictures Entertainment is working on bringing it out over here, and it's probably one of the best special editions I've ever done, because not only is there a commentary, but I had video of us rehearsing the actors with Johnny Five, and storyboards and all kinds of computer graphics of stuff, figuring out how we were going to do what we were going to do, and so it's a very rich Blu-ray, and when it comes available in the U.S., I'll obviously announce it on my Facebook page, and instantly people looking for me on Facebook, it's Kenneth Johnson Author, AUTHOR, Kenneth Johnson Author. That's how people on Facebook can find me.
It's such a delight to speak with you, because to me, you are the Steven Spielberg of television, sincerely. And you just have such a nice voice. I met you at a fan event in 2006 in Tampa, Florida, and then in 2007 in Burbank, California. And you're just so great to listen to. You could have been a college professor if you wanted to.
Well, I actually I am. I do that too.
Wow.
Back about 20 years ago, one of the actresses, Carrie Keene, who's become a dear friend since we first began working together in the 80s, she's an acting coach and teacher as well, and she kept after me to do a director's class, and I said, no. I kept putting her off, and she finally just leaned on me and said, Kenny, sit down and just start writing an outline and see what happens. And I remember sitting and writing on my little yellow legal pad for about 2 hours, and I shouted into my wife, Susie, you know what? I know stuff, and you don't think about it while you're doing it, but I've created a seminar. It's called The Filmmaking Experience: Life in the Trenches, about what it's really like to be there as a director and all the stuff that you encounter. And I use a lot of film clips in it from my stuff and other people's, as well as a lot of behind-the-scenes footage and storyboards. So it's really a master class, and I'm about to start it again next week for the New York Film Academy out here. I do it usually in 4 3-hour sessions. And I'm starting again next week for the New York Film Academy, where I've been doing it with them since 2009, but also at the English National Film School, and I also went to the University of Moscow once to talk to Russian filmmakers over there, and it was a great experience. So we can add that to the list, and it's fun. I really enjoy it.
That's an impressive resume. So over the years, I've seen you interviewed on the E! Entertainment Network, the Sci-Fi Channel, Arts and Entertainment for the Bill Bixby biography and things, but sure. I've never really heard your story. And by the way, if you have to run, let's do a little code. Just say, "Oh, the plumber's here" when you got to run. That'll be my cue to start wrapping up. But
we'll go as quick as we can here.
Okay.
But before we get started, you had sent me an email also from Glenn Price, who had a couple of questions.
Yes,
and,
technical questions.
Just before those get lost, I want to say that we always use Panavision cameras at Universal, not Aeroflex. At least on my shows. There were occasionally times when we needed a high-speed camera, in which case we'd use an Aeroflex for shooting something in slow motion. But generally, we were working with Panavision. And he also asked what the budget was per episode of the episodes back then. And the Bionic Woman, the $6 Million Man, they were in the $500,000 range, I think, pretty much. The Incredible Hulk went up a little higher. It was about $700,000 per episode. And we would get a license fee from the network for that amount of money, but it was almost impossible to make the show for that amount of money, and we'd always have to Universal would have to deficit some of it, but that was okay, because after it ran twice on a network, then the studio got it and they could run it into syndication forever. I still get residuals as a writer-director on Bionic Woman, and now they're down to about $1.25, when they come in. But Universal has certainly, got their money's worth out of it. But I wanted to make sure that Glenn, and he asked also one other thing that's interesting: were there ever episodes that went over budget or over time, and did they need to be rewritten or reworked or something? We rarely had time once we were shooting to go back and rework something, unless it was just a line or two where Bix called me in the night and said, Dr. David Banner wouldn't say this line, and I'd say, yes, he would, because I wrote Dr. David Banner. Well, I play Dr. David Banner. Bill and I had a lot of knockdown, drag-out arguments, but they were never about nonsense, Chance. They were always about substance, about would I say this line or not, And so it was a fun show to do, and yes, of course, we went over budget because there was no. As a matter of fact, until I did the Bionic Woman, all episodic television shows had been 6-day shoots. Every episodic television show, in every studio, they only filmed 6 days. When we started doing the Bionic Woman, I had to go to Frank Price, the head of Universal, and say, we can't do it in 6 days because Lindsay doesn't have that stamina, and the studio and the network want her to be in every scene.
Right.
And he said, well, sorry, we can't do that, can he? Or it won't happen. And I said, well, it's not going to happen. So we'd always budget for 6 days, but the Bionic Woman became the first 7-day show. And then then pretty soon a lot of the other studios and shows ended up doing shows in 7 days as well. And then when we did the Incredible Hulk, I had to, after we did the pilot, I had to go to Frank and say, and they were looking at it as a series. I said, Frank, we can't do the Incredible Hulk in 7 days. And he gave me the same speech again. Well, no, they're all 7 days. Well, we got 7 days, but no more than that. So we would always budget the Hulk episodes for 7 days, and they always went to 8 days. And that slowly became the norm. So I had the first 7-day show and the first 8-day series in the world out here. And all of my creative friends, the writers and directors, have thanked me over the years because it was too hard to do in the kind of time we were being given. But anyway, back to your question. How did I get started? I was in the 8th grade, and my 8th grade summer, just before my 9th grade school year. And I had saved up my money, Chance, and I bought a tape recorder, a new reel-to-reel tape recorder. Now, new in the 1958 when I bought it, I guess, or 57. It was the size of a suitcase, and it weighed 1,000 pounds, right? But I started listening to, recording things and listening to my voice and different sounds. And then I stumbled across the script that had been written for the Orson Welles radio show of The War of the Worlds that had been presented on radio back before I was born in 1939, which scared the bejesus out of the country. Because if you tuned in 30 seconds after the show started, where he told you it was a play, you didn't realize it was a play because it suddenly sounded like a normal evening's broadcast on CBS, where they were having music playing at some hotel somewhere, and then we have to interrupt this broadcast because something strange is happening in New Jersey. And then slowly we began to realize that the Martians had landed in New Jersey, and it was a brilliant radio show. And when I found the script, I thought, hey, this is cool. I want to do this. And I got together a bunch of my soon-to-be 9th grade pals, and we sat in my living room, and we recorded our own version of Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. I, of course, produced it and directed it. I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but that's what I was doing. And I also, of course, saved the Orson Welles role for myself, naturally. But when we played it at school, I played it for one class at school, and my teacher just went crazy for it. And she said, "We got to play this for all the different classes." So I became known in my high school as the drama guy, And I was also P.S. the guy that carried a briefcase, but we don't need to stick around and hang around on that. But
War of the Worlds, people committed suicide because they thought it was real. To your point, people that tuned in after the disclaimer were like, "Oh my God, this is really happening."
That's right. There were people jumping out of windows, and
Jeez.
but what that did is it gave me an interest in theater. And then in my sophomore year, they asked me, because I was the drama guy who had done the War of the Worlds thing. They asked me if I would play Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. At the Christmas, and I said, sure, yeah, that sounds like fun. And so I got the old beard, and I got worked up old age makeup and stuff. And we were rehearsing and it was sort of the regular high school version of Christmas Carol, and it just sort of came to an end and just sort of plopped. I felt, and I said, it needs something more at the end. And I went to my teacher, because I drama coach, and I found a recording I think that Noel Coward had made of A Christmas Carol, and at the end he just did this wonderful little 45-second summation that brought it all together. And I said, could I just do this at the very end of the show? And because it really sort of puts a nice end. And she said, that's great. I said, okay, good, I'll do that. And then I'm thinking, it really needs music. Now, you see what's happening here, Chance, is I'm already thinking
You're
like
directing.
a producer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and directing, And so I went to the voice coach, because the 60-piece choral was going to be there. And I said, what's the music that you're doing? And she showed me some of the songs, and I said, how about this one? Let's take Oh Holy Night. And when the curtain closes, the chorus starts singing it, but not the words. Just sing do 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 do, And I said, and just do that until you get to this particular point. I knew enough music to be able to know where I could say, now at this point, start singing full voice. So we did the play. Curtain closed. I stepped in. The chorus starts do 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 do, and I stepped out in front, and I said, well, that was a Christmas for you. And I may tell you that Tiny Tim did not die. He's fine, a flowing, and so every year when I get into an elevator, Chris, and the music starts, I start going into my story about poor old Tiny Tim, and it's really funny, and it ended. I timed it so that just as I got to the end of my little soliloquy, and said, and he's finishing up, and so as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. And at that point, the 60-voice chorus started full voice singing, fall on your knees, oh hey, and it was electrifying, Chance. I went back behind the car. I was slumped against the wall, and my little heart was going pity-pat, and I thought, oh my God, I've got to be in the theater.
The theater.
And that's when I realized I needed to be in the theater.
Well, was that 8th grade? Did you say you were in 8th grade?
Yeah, it was actually 8th when I bought the tape recorder,
right.
And 9th grade when we actually made the play, and then the 10th grade when I did Scrooge. That was it. I knew I had to be in theater, and I had not thought about film or anything like that. I was really thinking in terms of theater. And so I went into. I was lucky enough to audition and to get into what is now Carnegie Mellon University. It was then Carnegie Tech, but the drama department at Carnegie Mellon is still one of the most prestigious drama schools in the country. And I determined that I might not be good enough as an actor to make it as an actor, so I went in the directing major. But if you were a director, you still had to do all the same classes that the actors and everybody else did. And so I had to go and audition. I was one of about 1,500 people, and I was admitted. They admitted 94 of us, and some of those were production designers and music and writers and all that sort of thing. So it was strictly theater. There was no film or television. It was not a film school. I never did go to a film school. But when I started my freshman year at Carnegie, I met a guy who was a senior. He was not in the drama department. He was a business major. But he ran the school newspaper, and he also ran the Film Arts Society, which for on Thursday afternoons and evenings, he had screenings of a classic movie, a different one each week, from across the range of all of the classic cinema, all the way back to the 20s and internationally. So his name was Bill Pence. Bill bequeathed the Film Society to me, and I took over running it. Bill went on to create the Telluride Film Festival, along with his wife Stella, and was sort of the guiding light. I always call him the godfather of my career, because by running the Film Society, I was seeing, by the time I left Carnegie after 4 years, I had seen 400 or 500 of the greatest films ever made around the world, and I really really recognized that I wanted to bend toward film, and it took me a while to get there. I had to work in New York for a while as a producer-director. I was producing and directing at New York City at age 23, and then when I was 23 and a half, I guess, I got offered to become a producer on the Mike Douglas Show, which was then this big daytime talk show. Your parents or grandparents may have heard of it. It was, Oprah Winfrey had a pretty big audience. The Mike Douglas Show had an audience 10 times the size of Oprah's.
Wow.
There were
and Merv Griffin, too, in those days, yeah.
Well, yeah, but Merv Griffin was at night. We
Yeah.
were the only daytime talk show.
Wow.
And it was music. It wasn't just talk. It was music, variety. It was all that stuff. And everybody in the world who was pushing something came through there. Every actor, star or TV star or movie star that was talking about a show or a movie, they would come to the show to promote it, as well as the authors. I got to meet some of the great politicians of the world. And after a while, and you're doing 90 minutes a day, 6 times a week, and you just sort of get used to Paul Newman walking into your office, or Charlton Heston or Judy Garland standing beside the piano with you as she rehearses a song. It's like, and it was mind-boggling for this guy that was only 24 when I took over the show as executive producer. I was the youngest executive producer in the business, but I wanted to make movies is what I wanted to do. And finally, I took a deep breath and came to California, where I thought I had this pretty big, enormous Emmy-winning credit as a producer. But they said, "Well, what do you want to direct for? You're a talk show producer," And it was like, "Oh my God!" And I essentially had to start over again. And my pal Stephen Bochco, who had been at Carnegie with me,
Wow.
When I left, as a matter of fact, I left Steve the Film Society to run. But Steve had made it out to California before I did, and he had his foot in the door as a fledgling writer at Universal. And he kept urging me. He said, "Look, Kenny, if you're an actor, you can do bit parts and work your way up. But if you're a writer, you can write on spec, and hopefully somebody will buy it. But if you're a director, they either give you the money to do it or they don't. And usually, until you've done it for somebody else, they won't want to be the first one." And so it was really having to start over again. And I didn't think I was a very good writer at all, Chance. I had never. That was the one area of my training at Carnegie that I struggled with, was trying to write. But Steve just kept beating me up, and finally I started writing and discovered that I actually could write and write good dialogue and write good stories, and so I became, in the early 70s, a prolific writer of unproduced screenplays, that just never got made, and some of them are still on my shelf today. But eventually, Steve Cannell, who was also a pal at Universal.
Oh, love his work as well as yours.
Me too. Well, he was starting out just like I was at Universal, and he was able to give me a couple of writing assignments on shows he was doing. So did Bochco, and
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. And eventually, Steve Cannell managed to wangle a directing assignment for me there, which I did well on, and everybody was pleased about it. But it didn't kick over, and I didn't say, okay, now I'm really in show business. Well, until Steve Bochco gave one of the scripts that I had written for a feature to Harv Bennett, who was then a big executive producer at Universal. He was doing big miniseries like Rich Man, Poor Man, and things like that. But he also had this new show called
With Susan
$6
Sullivan.
Million Man.
Yeah, right.
And they were in their first. It was a mid-season pickup. They were in their first full season now, and they had no scripts, and they were desperate. And Harv read my feature script and said, "I can't help you get that produced, but bring me some ideas for $6 Million Man." So the first thing I suggested was The Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And Harv loved the idea, and so did Freddie Silverman, who was running ABC. And so I jumped in and wrote the Bionic Woman in about 10 days, I think it was. And Harv came back and said, "Hey, we really love the script. The problem is it's too dense." And I said, "Well, I told you, you want me to try to do too much. It's a love story that I'm trying to tell, and I've got to do all this mission stuff, and that's not what the people really want to see." He said,
relationships,
no. I said, yeah, exactly. I said, but if it's too dense, what do you want me to cut? And Harv said, "No, we don't want you to cut anything. We want you to add to it and make it longer. We want a 2-hour piece." I said, "But you only only have a 1-hour episodic time slot. And he said, yes, it's going to be a two-parter. It was the first time anybody done one of those in episodic television. And my first reaction was, that's good. And do I get paid a second time? And they said, yes, you get paid for a whole other script. So it was great because I think it was all the money I made that year was practically on that script. And Harv took me under his wing in the course of the production. Recognized he was taking me and started taking me into the editing room with him before we got to shooting Bionic Woman, and recognized that I knew how to edit film and knew how to do that sort of stuff. And so he asked me to be a producer-writer on the show. And I said, no, Harv, thank you, that's flattering, but let me just write and direct. Producing is kind of a pain in the ass. Writing and directing is what I really love. And he said, well, listen, let me explain it to you, Kenny, and maybe you heard me say this in one of the interviews. Harv said, Kenny, let me explain it to you. In television, it's the producer who hires the writer and who hires the director. Okay, I got that.
Pulling rank, yeah.
Yeah, I'll take that job. Thanks. Okay, ready to go. So anyway, that's sorry if I rambled on here, but that's sort of the short version of how I made my climb up into finally doing what I wanted to do. The problem I ran into was first of all, we made the Bionic Woman, and suddenly they wanted the return of the Bionic Woman, which was interesting because they had told me to kill her off, and
then the fans wrote in, and the ratings were so strong in that two-parter.
Yeah, that's it. The fans did write in. One of my favorite stories about that was it was the head of the psychology department at Boston University wrote and said, how dare you create this archetype, this female role model of empowerment, and just throw her away. So the studio and the network were noticing the fan mail, but what they really noticed were the ratings on 6 Mil had really ramped up. And so they said, well, yeah, why'd you kill her anyway, Kenny? That was a stupid idea. So, bring her back. Oh, okay, sure. So I managed to bring her back out of some sort of a deep freeze, not unlike what I do with Sherlock in the new book. And we went on the air. That was in the days when there were reruns through the summer, and the last rerun on 6 Mil was our original two-parter of the Bionic Woman, at the end of which they said, tune in next week to see the return of the Bionic Woman. And everybody in America tuned in, and suddenly the $6 Million Man was in the top 10 and remained there the whole time I was on the show. And then just right after that, they wanted to spin it off into its own series, where Lindsay and I would run. So for a while, I was writing and producing both 6 Mil and Bionic Woman at the same time. Chance, this is not a happy thing you want to do. It's like living in a garbage disposal, And also, I didn't have any time to direct because I was too busy being the admiral of the fleet for 2 different shows at the same time. It was madness.
Wow, incredible. Because see, here in Atlanta, there's been a lot of production of late because of tax incentives and the like. And directors now have to rise the ranks by being a PA and then an AD. And it seems like you just jumped right into it. What a stroke of luck.
No, because when I graduated Carnegie in 1964, the first job I had made a film, even though it was not a film school. My friend Bill Pence, I said, Bill, I need to really make a movie because I really feel like I got cinematic chops, but I got no equipment. And Bill at that time was doing his armed services with the Air Force, and he was running a film division at an Air Force base. And he said, what do you need? And I said, well, I need a camera and I need film. And he said, okay, what kind of camera and how much? Film. And he borrowed the camera and the film from the Air Force from me and sent it to me. And I made a little 30-minute sort of spooky, suspenseful thriller. I look at it nowadays and go, wow, that would really be a great 20-minute film. But nonetheless, it got me hired in New York eventually, but at first I couldn't. I started out as a PA at CBS in New York. It was the only gig I could get.
Production assistant, yep.
Production assistant in New York, and but we were actually sort of mini producers, but they just didn't want to pay us for that. But that got me into the Directors Guild because that was with DGA job, and then I just kept walking the streets of New York and talking to other places until for about a year. until WPIX, one of the big local stations in New York, saw the film that I made and said, "Hey, we'd like to hire you to produce and direct for us." And I said, "That's great. I can do documentary stuff." And they said, "Well, we've got this rock and roll show." And I said, "Okay, sure." So why not? And so I did have to rise up the same way. I just was fortunate enough and lucky enough and had just a few people have enough more confidence in me than I had in myself, Chance, to give me a shot. And that's how I was able to just sort of keep moving up, but then had to start all over again when I came to California because I didn't want to do any more talk show television or any more live TV or that stuff. And I had to prove my own chops and carve my new niche again in film. But I am ever grateful to my unfortunately late friends, both Steve's, Cannell, and Bochco, because, and Harv Bennett too has also we've lost as well. But the three of them really got behind me and helped me to get to where I wanted to be. And when incidentally, when Universal hired me as a producer, writer, director, I was the youngest one on the Universal lot. And by the way, the lowest paid, I'm sure, but it was great, and it gave me the opportunity to meet Lee and Lynn and Richard Anderson is one of my favorites. I know that you had asked about a Richard Anderson story. You know, he's Richard was great. Lindsay and I both spoke at his memorial service.
Oscar Goldman, sorry.
Yes, Oscar Goldman. Steve, you can't go in there, pal. It's too dangerous. Jamie, I won't let you do it. But Richard was a storied actor. I mean, he had a long career long before us. He worked for Stanley Kubrick in Paths of Glory. My favorite memory.
Forbidden Planet. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
I'm sorry.
I said, Richard, Stanley Kubrick is great, but man, you were on the set with Anne Francis wearing a little short skirt, in 1954 when I was a 14-year-old and going, oh my God, look at her.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Honey West.
And also I was completely captivated by what they had done in Forbidden Planet, because I didn't realize until later that it was a sort of a futuristic take on Shakespeare's The Tempest.
Yes.
And it was and the monster was Caliban and out of The Tempest, and Ariel, the sprite that could do all kinds of mischief, was Robbie the Robot. So it was really cool. But I know you mentioned did I have a favorite Richard story? And, a couple of things. One is that. First of all, we at the memorial service, we all realized in addition to a wonderful actor, what a great father he had been. His two daughters were there, and my God, the stories they told about him and what he did and what kind of a brilliant dad he was, while at the same time acting in two shows simultaneously. He's, I think, the only actor that's had playing the same character in two different series on two different networks at the same time. It was crazy. But whenever I would run into Richard, he would always remind me about the favorite line that I gave him to say, which was it was the Bionic Woman episode. We decided it would be fun to put Jamie into a habit and make her the Bionic Nun, and it was called Sister Jamie. Mm-hmm. And at one point, Oscar is trying to stop her from whatever she's doing there, and she is trying to prevent Oscar from getting in to stop what she's trying to do, and she sends out a couple of the other sisters to herd the sheep across the road so that Oscar's car can't get through. And so Oscar has been stopped by the flock of sheep in the middle of the road, and he gets out of the car and he yells out, "Sister, you have to get the flock out of here." And Richard, when Richard read the script, he called me and said, "They're never going to let me say that." And I said, "Well, let's try," because we were always pushing the limits.
Double entendre, yeah.
That's right. Always trying to push the broadcast standards limits in those days. Bochco particularly. And I said, "Richard, let's go for it. They haven't said anything, so let's do it." And by God, he did it, and it's in the show. And it was one of Richard's favorite lines always: "Get the flock out of here, sister."
I think Bochco was the one that showed a dude's ass on television.
That's right. The first time.
NYPD Blue, Dennis Franz.
Steve,
an ass you don't want to see, I might add.
Right.
But anyway.
Yeah, well, there's that too. Steve was always into pushing the envelope wherever he possibly could, and as Steve's form and fortune grew. I mean, when we were working together back then, this was way before Hill Street Blues and L.A. Law and NYPD Blue and all of those shows. He was just writing episodes for various series, and back then until he finally clicked with Hill Street. But he was great. I love Steve, and I miss him sorely, to this day.
Absolutely. I just want to add one thing. I also played Ebenezer Scrooge, but in 5th grade. But the furthest I ever got was as an extra or day player here in Atlanta so far. You're so lucky.
Well, listen, we've been endeavoring to try to get a theatrical remake of V set up, as probably you know, and because I own the movie rights, and we've been and I turned down a lot of offers from the major studios. Lots of money that was in the obscene level. It was so high, and because I was just afraid I might lose control of the quality, and I'd seen what happened when other people tried to reimagine my work, Chance, with the Bionic Woman, and then when they tried it again with V, and also with the Hulk, when they tried to make the first Hulk movies. Oh my God!
On NBC, yes, they were.
It was terrible, but it was. I was. The reason I was brought it up is that our plan is to do the bulk of the movie in an incentive state like Atlanta, where they have really good tax incentives, and we're not so fond of some of the other laws they pass there, but we try to work around that as much as we can.
Ooh, let me audition for a little bit part where the guy gets killed. I would love to have a gruesome death scene.
We'll at least do that. And the least I can give you, Chance, is a gruesome death. If we end up shooting in Atlanta, I guarantee you can hold me to it. You'll play the tape back and say, "See, you guaranteed me to give me a part." And we'll find you a shot for sure.
Damn, I was only kidding, but that's cool. That's really awesome.
You got it.
You sort of answered a lot of my initial questions about your background. Now, I minored in theater, by the way, at Marshall University, and like you, I wanted just to be on stage, and then they were having me take courses on how to build sets, and I didn't realize at the time that's the practicality of it, because the business is tough.
That's part. No, at Carnegie, your freshman year, when we sat down on our first day of at Carnegie, Ted Hoffman, who was the head of the department then, had the 94 of us sitting in the theater at Carnegie, and he said, "Okay, look at the person on your right and the person on your left." He said, "One of them will not be here next year." And it's not because they don't have talent, or it's not because of anything, except that we don't think they are worth our time.
Yeah.
You really had to bust your ass. And the idea of the freshman year at Carnegie was to either beat the theater into you or beat it out of you, And fortunately, I was asked to come back each year, but again, we spent a lot of our freshman year, in addition to the classes we were taking of writing and directing and lighting and costume and all of that, but we spent a hell of a lot of time building sets, and because that was their belief. And also their belief was in the whole idea of a classic theater training. I mean, we studied from the Greeks through the Romans, through Shakespeare, through the Reconstruction, all the way up to the present, and all the plays, and we performed in them, and we worked through them, and it was that sort of background that gave me that sense of, I think, classical drama. And that's part of where the Incredible Hulk came from, as a matter of fact, was it's classic Greek tragedy when you take a protagonist and you have that protagonist do something that the gods do not like. When you mess with things better left to the gods get angry at you and they come back at you. And that's why I had Bixby's character bring down the curse upon himself by saying, "I'm going to push the limits here of human knowledge by trying to bring out the hidden strengths that all humans have, but oops, you made a mistake and you went too far, and it's on you now, pal."
Played God, yeah.
Yeah, so the Hulk was really based on that Greek classic tradition of false hubris, of false self-confidence. confidence of just thinking one is smarter than one need to try to be, and so that's a lot of where my that and the fact that I had been reading Les Miserables at the time, a book that my wife Susie had given me. She read it when she was about 16, of course, and I was in the process of saying no to Universal about all the Marvel comic superheroes they were dangling for me to try to take on. They had bought the rights to 5 of the lesser-known Marvel characters, including the Hulk, and I had not wanted to be involved with any of them because they were all spandex and primary colors and stuff, and I just couldn't see my way in. But and I was trying to figure out how to say no politely to my bosses. But I was reading Les Miserables at the time, so I had that Jean Valjean, the fugitive concept, and Inspector Javert pursuing him relentlessly. And I thought, well, maybe there's a way to take a little bit of Victor Hugo and some, as I mentioned, Robert Louis Stevenson, the Jekyll and Hyde thing, and the really ridiculous thing called The Incredible Hulk, and try to blend it into a human drama. And fortunately, when I told them the idea, they said, "Okay, we like that." I said, "Good. There's a couple of conditions. It has to be my casting. I wanted to make sure that the actor, they didn't shove some actor down my throat that I didn't want." And Bix was the one that I had in my head from the very beginning, because I'd never worked with him. I had met him a couple of times just casually, but I had seen a television play that he did in 1973, Chance. It was called Steam Bath.
Yes, Valerie Perrine was in it. I'm familiar with it.
Valerie Perrine was in it and very naked through a lot of
Yes.
it. And because it was done on PBS, and one said, "Oh my goodness, she actually doesn't have any clothes on." But Bix in that show, in that play, in that 90 minutes, went through every color that an actor could possibly go through, from anger to tension to frustration to pain, and he was just so believable and empathetic throughout. And I asked his agent to give Bill the script, and his agent told me that when he gave Bix the script, Bix said, "I'm not even going to read a script that's called The Hulk, so forget that." And his agent said, "Yes, you are going to read it, Bix." And he did, and suddenly got on board, and we were great pals for 5 years and over 90 hours of television together.
And there's a big twist in that. I guess we'll go ahead and spoil it because it was from 1973. The twist is everyone in that steam bath is dead.
That's right. That's true.
It's like a Twilight Zone twist.
Well, it was a very interesting play because it was in a nutshell. Obviously, you've seen it. It was about a group of people in a steam bath who couldn't remember how they got there, and slowly they realized that the steam bath is purgatory, and that the little Puerto Rican the steam bath attendant who's going around passing out the towels and stuff, he's really God. He's really God.
Yes.
And it's
yes.
like, okay, and so it was a very, very interesting, and you can still get it on Netflix or the DVD.com, which is the Netflix place where people can still get DVDs.
That's so cool. Well, The Incredible Hulk came along at the right time, about 6 months after Star Wars was hitting movie theater screens and tearing it up at the box office. My question is, was it intended to be a Halloween week or pre-Halloween production, or was that not even a consideration?
No, it never even occurred to me at the time.
Because it aired November 4th, right after Halloween.
Yeah, it was November 4th. It aired after Halloween, and no, that wasn't a thought. CBS had bought two-hour movies of several of the titles that Universal had acquired. And incidentally, here's a joke for you: Universal acquired the rights to those 5 Marvel comic characters. Total for all 5, Universal paid $15,000.
Oh my! Are you kidding me? God.
No, it's true. That's because, and Stan has told me, and I heard him repeat to audiences while as I was sitting there, how he really always felt that it was the Incredible Hulk that really got the ball rolling with Marvel, and Stan felt that what I did with the show, he said a lot of flattering things. That he really. And told me privately as well as publicly that he wished I had done all of his, because it was was not easy always because Stan, I had to explain this. I called him up and I said, Stan, I can't do what you did in the comic book. I said I want to change his name because I don't want that comic book alliteration of Peter Parker, Lex Luthor, Lois Lane, Clark Kent. That kind of, I was trying to take it away from every one of the comic book tropes that there were. And I mean, I still had to deal with a Green Man, which I also fought about. I said, Stan, what is he, the envious Hulk, the jealous Hulk? The color of rage, Stan, is red. And but he said, well, he started gray, and then they got a pretty nice gray. So I never won the green red battle. But Stan basically just stepped aside and said, Kenny, I see what you're doing, and I see why it has to be done the way that you're trying to do it, so that it gets a larger audience. And interestingly, Chance, we were what the studios and the networks call a 4-quadrant project, which meant it hit all 4 quadrants of the audience that they were looking for: the adult men, the adult women, the teenagers, and the kids. We were big on all 4 of them, but the largest single section of our audience was women.
Yes.
And that's been true on all of my stuff, from Bionic Woman through Hulk, through V, through Alien Nation, everything I've done. And again, I think it comes back to emotional structure and being interested in relationships. I never sat down to say, well, how can I appeal to the women?
Well, you had women writers, Karen Harris, Jill Sherman. I mean.
Yes, I did. Karen and Jill, just very quickly, when I was doing the pilot for the Hulk, Robert Harris, who was the head of Universal then, asked me he said, Kenny, my sister and her partner, Jill, or her writing partner, they're fledglings, they haven't done anything. Would you just take a story meeting with them, and so they can get a sense of what it's like to do a story meeting, And I said, sure. So they came in and they wrote they told me the story idea, and it was really kind of clever. And I said, okay, we'll hire you. Write the story. And they wrote the story, and it was pretty good. We had to bend it around a little bit. And then I said, okay, we sent them on to script. It was their first script for a major show. And the script came in, and it was not so good, Chance. And I was really kind of cringy. And as always happened when we used outside writers to help, one of us who was actually doing the show, myself or Jim Parriott, and we had one other guy that was working with us at the time. We didn't have the writer's room that they seem to have now in every show with 14 people sitting in a room. No, it was 3 of us, and we were strapped, so we'd obviously try to find outside writers that can do. So I had to rewrite Karen and Jill's script, like from page 1, and went through and it was very changed and very different, but it really worked, and we could shoot it, Yeah. And then I called Karen and Jill in and said, look, before you see this, I want you to see, let's go through it page by page, and I'll show you why I made the changes that I made and the reason for doing that. And they were great, and they understood, and they were so appreciative, and I felt, okay, I'd done a good deed. And then a couple of weeks later, Karen called and said, we got another idea, and I went, oh, God, okay, come on in.
I have to rework this one,
too.
Yeah,
one more time, Okay, well, bye, that's okay. So they came in, and the next story was also really good. And the first, the pitch, and then the story that they wrote was much better than the first story they'd written. And when the script came in, it was really good. And I still had to go through and make some little but basically they were good. And at that point I said, maybe it's time, instead of trying to write episodic scripts, you guys became story editors on the show. And so I moved them up to story editors. The next year we moved up their credit again to executive story consultant or something. And by the 3rd year, Karen and Jill were producing and writing the Hulk. So.
They wrote a great episode. I think it was called Psychic, with Brenda Bonet, who was Bill Bixby's real life wife and ex-wife. And that was a very, very haunting episode. And it dealt with suicide and by the way, the Hulk, I think it also was an analogy based on interpretation. Some might have thought it was an analogy for alcoholism when he turns into the Hulk.
Well, actually, you see, it was
psychological.
Exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, what we were looking for, what makes a Hulk episode, And to me, the theme of the series basically was self-control, or of controlling whatever your enemy within was, whatever your demon within. In the case of Dr. Banner, it was anger. That was his demon. But with others, it was alcohol, or others, it was addiction to something of a drug, or with others, somebody else, it could be obsession,
Yeah.
or it could be greed.
Sex
And
addiction, whatever. Yeah.
yeah, we would always try to focus on, what's it about, not what's the plot or what's the storyline, but what's the story about. And we weren't successful in every episode. My God, you're doing so fast and so many. You don't hit the ball all the time, but our best ones did. And the psychic one that you mentioned, it's interesting because that show was filmed after Bill and Brenda, his wife, had been through a really contentious divorce. It was the only time I ever really saw Bill get angry.
Right.
Was in trying to deal with his divorce from Brenda.
Custody battle too, I would imagine. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and yet
Child.
once the divorce was behind them, they both felt that it was important for their 7-year-old son Christopher to see them working amicably, and so we crafted specifically that episode. Bill asked us if we could write one that would be good for Brenda, and that's what we did.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then of course a year later after that. Bill's son Christopher died unexpectedly, and a year following that, as you probably know, Brenda herself committed suicide.
God.
And it was Bill had a tumultuous and in many ways tragic life. Certainly, his death by prostate cancer was horrifying, and
Which was preventable, by the way. Yeah.
and way too young.
Yes.
Way too young.
Colonoscopy, get it, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. It was, and I was talking to him up until the day before he died. We were really, really, really close, but the time that we spent together, and the beauty of, and this is really the whole reason why in college, in spite of getting the theatrical training, I didn't get into the movie end of it, just because I wanted to have a larger audience and a larger proscenium to work in, which is true. I mean, when you're working in film, suddenly the world is your stage. When my daughter Julie was going to NYU, the film school there, I'd go back and visit her in New York, and we'd be walking through Times Square. I remember one night we were walking through Times Square together, and she looked around and paused and said, "God, Dad, look at all the extras." And because she was looking at it at Times Square like all of filmmakers do, as a set, as a location, and all of the people are just extras. But the other reason that I loved the idea of film was because you can have a wonderful moment in live theater where you're watching a performance and an actor or actors do a performance that is mind-boggling and just brilliant and touches you so deeply, emotionally, whatever, and it's an amazing thing. But then the curtain closes, and it's only in your memory, But if you can capture that performance on film, well, there you go. It's on film, and then it's on VHS, and then it's on Beta, and then it's on VHS, and then it's on DVDs, and now it's on Blu-ray.
4K, Blu-ray, everything.
That's right, but everybody can still see the audience can still see the same emotional moments that the actors struck, and it's not just from now, but you can go all the way back to Buster Keaton and the silent era, where we're looking at stuff that was made over 100 years ago now, and it's still just as funny or strong or emotional or moving, and we've got it, as long as we take care of the film. So I just matter of fact donated. I had 35 millimeter prints of all of the things that I had directed, and I'd had them stored. And I finally said, I don't want my family, my daughters, to have to worry about this after I'm gone, and I got it all squared away, and they've all been donated and gone now to the UCLA Film Library, and because it's important that people hang on to the stuff.
The negatives?
Yeah. Well, not the negatives. These are prints. But,
okay.
The UCLA really, really, really takes care of them, and it's it's a good thing. So.
Better than Universal did with that terrible fire in 2008 when so much was lost. But I digress.
Yes, no, that's true. All of
due to improper storage and.
Right.
Well, I was going to. It's like a form of immortality. What you just described to your point. I mean, these performers.
That's exactly what it is. Yes.
It's incredible. No pun intended. let's see here. Well, I mean, two of my.
Oh, I know what I want. I know what I
Oh,
wanted to mention because you mentioned because I'm going to snap back at you here. You also helmed Alien Nation on television. How did that happen? That was a very underrated program. Actually, it wasn't. It was the highest-rated Fox TV movie they'd ever had when I did the original one, and the audiences loved it, and the critics adored it, and because when Fox asked me if I would take a look at this movie that had not done very well, but they thought might have a series in it, my friend Harris Cattleman was running 20th, and he asked me to come over as I said, Harris, what's the title of it? Tell me. And he said, Alien. They said, oh no. I done V. I done I don't. I'm the drama guy from high school who then became the talk show guy, then became the sci-fi guy. And I thought,
typecast, but
he
not
said,
cast. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Type director, typewriter.
That's it. But Harris, I said, okay, look, I'll come look at it, and I'm in the theater, and to me, you may have heard me describe it as Miami Vice with cone heads. That's what I sort of felt.
It looked like Conehead.
There was an idea, but it didn't go anywhere. But then there was this one scene where Mandy Patinkin, playing the alien cop, gets picked up by his partner, Jimmy Kahn, and Mandy looks out and waves back at his family. And there's one shot only of the little alien wife, and two little alien kids standing on this downtrodden doorstep. And the bell went off in my head. I said, oh, okay, I see what this show is. I get it. And I went back to the Fox execs and said, you think you've got like Lethal Weapon with aliens, buddy cops with aliens. That's cool, huh? Right now. And they said, yeah. And I said, no, that's not what you've got. Let me do something that's more like In the Heat of the Night, that's about intolerance and prejudice and about what it's like to be the lowest one on the totem pole, what it's like to be the newcomers, and that I can do something with. And they said, okay, and they let me do it. And the audiences just soaked it up, and the critics saw exactly what we were doing, and every minority community in the country sent us awards and praise because the black audience. I got a letter from a black doctor saying, I heard Alien Nation was going on. I was mad. Why do we need another alien show? Why don't they do a show about the black experience? He said, and then I saw your show and realized, oh, it was about the black experience.
It's an analogy, yeah.
Exactly, but without offending anybody. You could say the most outrageous things that were really racist, or in this case, speciest. But we got away with it. But it made people stop and think, and the critics again all just rallied around us, and we never got a bad review from any of the top critics in the country. Barry Diller canceled the show after the first season because he felt he had never had a show on Monday nights, and he decided that he wanted to get Fox Network, into Monday nights by putting on 21 Jump Street with what's his name, Johnny Depp. Whatever happened to him, and followed by Alien Nation. And so we opened Monday nights for them against Monday Night Football, Wow. And we still got really substantial numbers, way higher than they were expecting, and the series continued that all the way through. But at the end of the first season, we'd already started writing scripts for the second season when Barry Diller suddenly decided, I think I can get bigger ratings with comedies. And Peter Chernin, who was then his second in command, later went on to run Fox, called me and said, I got bad news. Barry doesn't want to pick up the show. And I said, Peter, you're crazy. It's a huge mistake. And he said, Kenny, I agree with you, but it's Barry's call, and that's, so. And the next year, so they went on with comedies. Their comedies went so far into the toilet, Chance, that Fox had to give Monday nights back to the affiliate stations. They had nothing to put on, and they had crashed and burned. And Peter Chernin got up in front of the Television Critics Association that year and publicly apologized, saying the biggest mistake they'd ever made at Fox was to cancel Alien Nation. You can imagine I was on the phone that afternoon saying, so, Peter? And he said, well, we don't know if we can fit it in. So for a couple of years, I kept badgering them. And finally, I got a call from a new exec at Fox who said, can I take you to lunch? Sure. Okay. So I'm sitting at lunch, and he said, listen, would you ever consider maybe coming back and doing some more Alien Nation? And I said, wow, what a brilliant idea, you know? And so we did a 2-hour movie that sort of picked up where we had left off, and with our cliffhanger that we had made a cliffhanger because we thought we were going to have more series. And it became the highest-rated TV movie Fox had done, and so suddenly they were inspired to buy 4 more TV movies, which we did, and everybody came back, and it was so much fun. As a matter of fact, if you go onto YouTube and Google Alien Nation Family Gathering, if you go to YouTube for Alien Nation Family Gathering, you will find a wonderful half-hour piece that my editor pal Dave Strohmeyer and I put together. We used to have our Alien Nation family picnics every couple of years, and I was listening to them talk with one of them, and I called him back later, and I said, listen, the whole cast, I said, why don't you come back and sit in the living room and just reminisce again, but this time I got 4 cameras on you, you know? And that's what we did, and the Family Gathering is a really wonderful little documentary piece intercut with a lot of the footage from the original that shows how much fun we had because it was like a repertory company of actors that all loved each other and worked together like clockwork. And we were also doing a show that had real substance and social significance to it. And so it was something that that really made us proud. We won a couple of Emmys and as well. And the last TV movie aired, I guess, back in '67 or '68. And I've been back to Fox a couple times since then, saying, look at what's going on in the world. Hello.
Yeah, 1997 was the last Alien Nation TV movie. Yep.
That's right. And you can't. The TV DVD that we did of the TV movies is gone out of print because when Fox bought Disney, somehow it's fallen between the cracks, and we were trying to get it resurrected. In the meantime, people who are interested, you can see the episodes of the TV movies that we did on YouTube. The quality of the visual is not great, but it's better than nothing, and they're really good stories. But again, people go to my website, kennethjohnson.us, and check the Alien Nation movies, and there's links to where they can go and see some of the stuff.
Excellent. Well, that's a perfect transition. You mentioned Disney, so I want to ask you about something. I'm sure you're aware of it. I'm sure one of your many fans have told you about this if you didn't see it yourself. But in the season 1 finale of She-Hulk, they paid homage to your Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno, and the great Jack Colvin.
Yes, they bless their hearts. People have told me about it. I did not see any of the episodes of the show, but I did see the opening that they made.
Yeah, someone put it on YouTube, right? And it's tongue in cheek. It's tongue in cheek.
Yeah, it's tongue in cheek. It's a little peculiar and a bit awkward, but okay. I see. But I got to tell you, my favorite parody, and you must probably be aware of it too, is Family Guy.
Yes.
Family Guy did the exact main title. You can actually see them side by side on YouTube. And they did it cut for cut, framing for framing, all the way through. But instead of Dr. David Banner, it's Stewie, and the year before that, they had done him. They ended their show in credits with him walking away, with a coat over his shoulder and thumbing for a ride with Joe Harnell's music from The Incredible Hulk, But the main title is just hysterical, and that's of the parodies or homages that have been done. The one that they did on Family Guy is my all-time favorite, and I would urge people to go and take a look at that.
My question, Ken, about that, if I may call you Kenny, you once told me to call you Kenny,
Kenny.
were you notified by Disney that they were going to use your footage from the Incredible Hulk pilot? Was there compensation, anything like that?
Well, the WGA and the Writers Guild and the Directors Guild, they take care of us.
Oh, good.
And whenever anybody uses a clip, we get paid. Would you like to buy my share for $1? It's not a lot, but yeah, no, they take care of that, and nobody has to ask me anything. Although it's kind of funny when Susan Sullivan, who played the love interest, of course, in the original Hulk movie.
Dr. Elena Marks, her character,
yeah,
yes.
And if you want to talk about underrated, the success of that original movie was almost solely in the hands of Susan. And, well, Bix, of course, yes, but it was Susan who had to keep us grounded in the reality of this stuff could really happen. and oh my God, how would I deal with it if I were in her shoes?
Mm-hmm.
And she was so grounded in reality that by saying the stuff that we would have said in her circumstances, and her performance was just magic. And so
That
now
death
Fade Out
scene.
Fade.
I mean, it just makes you cry.
Well, yeah, no, yeah, she was extraordinary all the way through, and all the little moments because she and I agreed from early on that she should never touch Bix. That when they were standing together, she would never put her hand on his shoulder. She would, they didn't touch each other.
Maybe
And
through
the
glass.
moment
That was about it. Yeah.
Exactly, except
Yeah.
the glass is between them. When
Yeah.
their hands, he's inside the chamber and she's not. But that was important all the way through, that we kept that distance all the way. You'll see sometimes in the movie she even catches herself where she's about to reach out and touch him, and she just clutches her hands back and remembers, no, I'm not supposed to touch him, and I mustn't. But she was extraordinary. And then this show Castle came on, and with Nathan Fillion, and Stephen Bowman, who is the son of Chuck Bowman, who produced The Hulk with me, and Stephen has literally grown up in my house practically. We spent every 4th of July together from his birth year on, and Stephen was at the time on Castle, was the associate producer, and I got a call from him one night and said, "Hey, how would you feel about us using a clip from the Hulk on Castle?" And I said, "Be my guest, Steve. I don't have to give any approval. All you guys do is just go to Universal and say, But he was very courteous that he wanted to make sure it was okay with me. I said, "Absolutely, okay." So I didn't think about it any more than that. And about a month or so later, Susie said, "Hey, Kenny, you should come in here and take a look at this." Okay. So I come in, and she's been watching. She was a fan of the Castle, so she's been watching Castle. And there is Susan playing Nathan Fillion's mother, who is on her show Castle, is a retired actress, former actress, and she is sitting there watching one of her old performances. And it's her and trying to talk down Lou when he had first hulked out in that laboratory scene.
Wow.
And so she's sitting there on the thing and watching herself, playing that role 35 years earlier. And what they did was they had Nathan Fillion walk in and see what she's doing, and he said, "Watching old wedding videos, Mom?" And it was very funny scene. So it was funny for both, for so many reasons, But it was wonderful, and it was funny to see her used like that again. And I called her, as a matter of fact, and I hadn't talked to her in a long time, and she remembered the Hulk as being one of the highlights of her life at that time back there. But I have to end this pretty quick here now, Chance. But I was going to say that I was so gifted to have, or so blessed, that's what I want to say, so blessed to have Susan and Bix and Jack Colvin and Louie, who, thank God, is still around along with Susan. I was so lucky to have all of those gifted people lend their talents to my shows, and as well as the folks in Alien Nation, as well as Mark Singer and Faye Grant and Jane Badler and Robert Englund and all the people who were in V.
Freddy Krueger, yeah.
Yes, but Freddie, Robert called me a couple of years ago when he was out doing public appearances for Freddy versus Jason.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Kenny, it's really kind of embarrassing." He said, "We have these press conferences, and I'm there, and the press is raising their hands to ask questions, and there are always questions about playing Willie in V, And at one point, the guys that were trying to promote the other show said, "Does anybody have any questions for Robert that are not about V?" And all of the hands went down. He said it was really funny, but it was grand. But and it's been great talking to you too, Chance. I hope that I haven't rambled on too long here for you.
I've been hanging on to every word. I loved it. You are a rock star, and it's very generous of you to share all these stories with me and the audience here, and to spend so much time in this interview. This is way more time than you agreed to, and I'm very grateful.
Well, I'm happy to do it, Chance. It's important, and I hope that people, try to see into what I've tried to do in my career is just to try to strike out as much as we can for humanity and for tolerance and for one of the great things about doing Alien Nation was it gave me an opportunity to really talk about stuff that's vitally important. I was raised as an only child in a very anti-Semitic, very bigoted household, and for some reason, it just never stuck. And I didn't.
Thank God for that. It didn't stick.
Yes,
Jeez.
I don't know quite why, but every night at dinner, I would hear every racial slur or epithet that there was to hear about them, whoever the them happened to be that particular evening, and I just grew up thinking this doesn't feel right to me, and since then I have done my best to try to strike out against intolerance. Even Short Circuit 2 is about stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they see a robot and they can't believe that there's a human thing inside him, and that's why I did the movie, because I said to Jeff Sagansky when I turned him down a couple of times, and finally he said, why? And I said, well, you've got this wonderful opportunity to do the Elephant Man. And he said, what are you talking about? This is a movie about a little robot. I said, yeah, but it's really like the Elephant Man, the real human being who was so misshapen that he looked like a monster. But he would say, I am a man inside here, you know?
Yeah.
And people couldn't see through to see that humanity. And I said, let me mine all of that humanity and talk about how you got to look past what the surface is. And see what's really going on the inside. And it's Susie, my wife, has posted a couple of times 2 photographs side by side. On one side is a white egg and a brown egg sitting there, and on the other side are each of those 2 eggs, like after they've been broken and they're in the pan. And gee, they look the same on the inside. What a concept, you know. And I think it's important for the one message I always try to get out to people is try to do whatever you can in the interests of humanism and in the interests of tolerance
Mm-hmm.
and against intolerance. And if your listeners get nothing else out of this whole thing, I would hope that would be the message that would stick with them.
Absolutely, and all of your casts were always very, very diverse.
Yeah, truly, that too.
All right, well, Mr. Johnson, thanks again, Kenny, and best of luck with your book, Holmes, coming, available wherever you want to find a fine book to read, including Amazon, and Blackstone has an audio version that I'm going to buy myself.
See if you can figure out which of the voices is me. Okay, that's great, Chance. Thanks a lot. And if we can be up and going and in Atlanta, you're going to be on the set with us.
I can't believe. Thank you. I wasn't mining for that, but I'll take it. I'm very grateful. That makes my day.
Take care, my friend.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Bye.
You bet. Bye.
What a great guy. Oh, man. And I'm going to now talk about some history of his shows that he produced and created. I just like he actually echoed a lot of what I was going to say about the humanity in his shows, like The Incredible Hulk, like the little things. Like I liked how the creature, the Hulk, was always kind to animals. You ever notice that? He was always really kind, and it just showed the heart. And I love that line by Dr. Elena Marks, played by Susan Sullivan, that Mr. Johnson talked about, where Banner's concerned about killing someone when he transforms into the creature, and she says, No, David. The creature won't kill because David Banner will not kill. It's like biblical, right? It's like the 10 Commandments right there in the form of television, the most powerful mode and medium out there in terms of reaching a mass audience. And I wanted also to mention, if you're still listening, Mr. Johnson, my friend Curtis of the Retro Zest podcast may reach out to you. He has a great show. It's not live, and he does a lot of great post-production stuff. I couldn't play as many clips as I wanted to because I didn't want to interrupt you while you were speaking. So I'm just on cloud 9 to have had Mr. Kenneth Johnson. And I'm going to quickly review, and then we'll wrap this edition of the Nostalgic Podblast. I don't want to go on and on. I want Mr. Johnson to be the primary focus of this special edition of the Nostalgic Podblast. And darn it, I meant to ask him for a sounder if he would say, "This is Kenneth Johnson. You're listening to the Nostalgic Podblast," or "This is Kenneth Johnson, creator of the Bionic Woman, the TV's Incredible Hulk, Alien Nation, V, the original miniseries, and author of the new book, Holmes Coming. You're listening to the Nostalgic Podblast." Anyway, I ran out of, it just slipped my mind. Another thing I wanted to mention about the She-Hulk Season 1 finale to Mr. Johnson is not only did they do a tribute to the classic Incredible Hulk TV show opening credits right at the beginning of the season 1 finale of She-Hulk. But towards the end, little spoiler, we actually see in that episode, and it's a comedic episode in a comedic series, we learn that the president, the real life president of Marvel, the MCU and Marvel Studios, Kevin, is really a machine. And they had an acronym, Kevin, Kevin, and it was just like Kenneth Johnson's Alex from the Bionic Woman 2-part episode that he wrote, produced, and directed titled Doomsday is Tomorrow, which you had this omnipotent robot nemesis for Jamie Summers and the Bionic Woman. And it was a great episode about us being on the brink of World War III, nuclear holocaust. Anyway, but I thought there was kind of like 2 homages or tributes to the great Kenneth Johnson's work, The Incredible Hulk and the Bionic Woman, in that season 1 finale of She-Hulk. So, gosh, there was so much I wanted to ask him. Maybe he'll come back next time he has a new book that he wants to talk about. But I'm really grateful for that. Now, I need to get some more coffee, and I'm going to play and I want to show on camera. By the way, if you're listening at fistfulofradio.com or on Apple or any of the audio platforms that we're on, such as Stitcher and TuneIn.com, I would direct you to the YouTube channel, The Nostalgic Podblast, or the Facebook group, The Nostalgic Podblast. If you want to see what I'm going to hold up for the camera, I have several items, including a shot of Lindsay Wagner winning her Emmy Award for the Bionic Woman, and I'll tell you about that in a moment, and some other pictures of some of Kenneth Johnson's most prominent television work. I want to mention to you also, there was something I didn't want to mention in the interest of time, but there was a really cool short-lived show called Cliffhangers on NBC that I really liked in early 1979, and it was just like it sounds. It was a show that had 3 ongoing stories: a modern-day Dracula story, a story about a reporter that stumbles on a conspiracy called Stop Susan Williams, starring Susan Anton in that role. And then you had a Cowboys and Aliens type story about an alien civilization that's like underground in the Old West. And a cowboy stumbles upon this strange civilization. And it was a really, really cool show. And of those 3 stories, before it was canceled by NBC, because NBC foolishly placed it up against Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, which was ratings gold in those days. So I don't think it got a fair time slot, but it was a very, very intriguing show. I wish it would come back in the form of home video or streaming, but I don't think that's very likely. But let me just play a little bit of audio here. I'm going to play just the opening theme to The Bionic Woman, and then I'm going to go over the history of some of Kenneth Johnson's most prominent television shows, because I need to get some coffee, and I want to show, while this is playing on camera, some of my what I think are interesting Bionic Woman items from my collection, my personal collection. The theme to The Bionic Woman there, as obviously. Let's talk about it real quick. This is a very brief history. The Bionic Woman was obviously a spinoff of the $6 Million Man, a character whom Kenneth Johnson himself created when he wrote the Bionic Woman Part 1 and 2 episode of the $6 Million Man that he talked about. It was towards the end of season 2 of the $6 Million Man. And obviously, they killed off the character of Jamie Summers, who in the story was the high school sweetheart of Steve Austin, who later would become a colonel in the Air Force and an astronaut who walked on the moon in that show. And of course, he had that tragic accident where he's turned into a cyborg. And obviously, you can't have, because they actually got engaged in that story. They introduced her character before she goes on a skydiving accident with Steve and she's injured, and she has to be altered to save her life with bionic implants. But in the storyline, since they were engaged, you couldn't have Steve Austin get married. I mean, you know how network television works. I mean, even going back to Star Trek, they had to get rid of Yeoman Rand, that character who was getting really close to Captain Kirk, because the way television works is you want to build and maintain an audience. And so you want to have attractive guest stars, both male and female, to attract that audience. And so if you have a main character bogged down in a relationship, according to the old network formula of those days, that was not good. That was poison. So I think that might have been some of the logic behind killing her off. And then there was that public outcry that Mr. Johnson spoke about with letters, plus the strong ratings and the other pressures. And the Massachusetts institution that wrote Kenneth Johnson, claiming that was just a tragedy to kill off that wonderful character and role model. So they brought her back in the season 3 premiere of the $6 Million Man, titled The Return of the Bionic Woman, another two-parter. And that was so popular that toward the tail end of that 1975 to 1976 television season, the Bionic Woman was spun off as its own weekly series. The $6 Million Man would air on a Sunday night, and the Bionic Woman would air on a Wednesday night. And so it started as a winter replacement series in the middle of 1975-76 season, debuting on Wednesday, January 14th, 1976. That was the first time you saw an all-new Bionic Woman episode, and it aired Wednesday nights at 8. ABC kept it on the schedule until May 4th, 1977. But fortunately, NBC picked up the Bionic Woman at a truck stop and began airing, began airing the Bionic Woman on what I think was an unfortunate night to build an audience, Saturdays at 8 p.m. And that started on September 10th, 1977, with an episode titled The Bionic Dog, Part 1, a two-parter that introduced Maximilian, or Max for short, the world's first bionic animal, in the form of a dog, German Shepherd. So, when ABC canceled The Bionic Woman, it was shocking because the ratings were still good, and it also killed off Wonder Woman in that same swoop. I guess it was Silverman who did it, who was the head of ABC. But for whatever reason, both Wonder Woman, I think it was due to budgetary reasons. I'm just interjecting. Chance Bartels, your friendly host here. This is just my opinion. It was probably due to budget, but I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm not like Kenneth Johnson, who was there. That's just what I think. So what was really cool was 2 days after the Bionic Woman premiered on NBC, Lindsay was recognized for one of her many outstanding acting performances on The Bionic Woman when it was still on ABC. And she received an Emmy Award. Like I said, just 2 days after the NBC premiere of The Bionic Woman. She won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series. And she received this Emmy Award. I'm going to show a shot of her posing with her Emmy from that very night, September 12th, 1977. She acted in a two-part episode titled Deadly Ringer, Parts 1 and 2, and she won this Emmy specifically for her performance in Part 2 of that story. And that was a continuation from a Season 1 storyline about a character she portrayed in a dual role named Lisa Galloway, who was like a lookalike, surgically altered lookalike, and a criminal from the South. And so Lindsay was acting in a Southern accent. And basically, her character, Lisa Galloway, is taking a drug to simulate bionics or superpowers, and it winds up poisoning her. And so Lindsay just turns in an incredible, incredible performance in that episode. Deadly Ringer Part 2. Now, other major talents who also won an Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress along with Lindsay Wagner that night on September 12th, 1977 included Sally Field as Sybil for NBC. She won that Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama or Comedy Special. And man, that was based on the book about the true story, multiple personalities. I mean, what a performance that the great Sally Field did in Sybil. Some of the best acting of all time, along with Lindsay's in The Bionic Woman. And then also that night, Patty Duke Aston won an Emmy Award for a production titled Captains and Kings, NBC's Bestsellers. And she won for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Limited Series. And then also that night, Bea Arthur. She won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series for her title role of Maude, which was a spinoff of All in the Family. And then that same night on the male side, of course, Carroll O'Connor, he won all sorts of Emmy Awards. He was just one of the best actors out there. God rest his soul. He's immortal. He's immortal thanks to celluloid and video. And The Bionic Woman, its third and final season, aired its last all-new episode on May 13th, 1978, with an episode titled On the Run. And in that episode, at long last, stoic Oscar Goldman, played by Richard Anderson, confessed that he's in love with Jamie Summers, played by Lindsay Wagner, which was something that actor Richard Anderson wanted the show writers to craft in a story. And why I say that is there's a blooper reel or gag reel. Gosh, I meant to mention that to Mr. Johnson about what I think he provided these great reels for home video release. They released at least the Incredible Hulk gag reel, and what these gag reels were, they were just outtakes and, bloopers, like bloopers and practical jokes on NBC. You know what a blooper is. Everybody knows what that is. But these were like funny, uncensored bloopers that were originally intended just for the cast and crew for wrap parties or holiday parties, Christmas parties, holiday parties, whatever you want to call it. And they're really, really funny, and it gives you a sense of being on the set. You can live vicariously through these blooper reels. But there's one blooper where, and I think it's from the episode Kill Oscar Part 1, the first episode ever with the Fembots, which was like a take on Westworld and the Stepford Wives. It was just like female robots. It looked very eerie, very eerie. These creatures, or these mechanical fictional beings, the Fembots. And of all people, John Houseman played the mad scientist that created the Fembots. And he's an Oscar winner, and he'd worked with Lindsay in the movie The Paper Chase, which became a TV show, which he actually acted in the TV show too, John Houseman, which was strange. Usually when there's a television version of a movie, the actor from the movie never joins the cast, or seldom does. I mean, it happened on rare occasion. Like with Alice, the sitcom, there was a movie, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, and the actress who played Flo didn't play Flo in the TV show, but she played Belle. Anyway, I'm all over the place with this, but let's get back on track with The Bionic Woman. So the last time that The Bionic Woman aired in prime time on NBC as a weekly regular series was on September 2nd, 1978, which was a rerun. As Kenny Johnson said, NBC aired reunion movies of not just The Incredible Hulk, but also The $6 Million Man and The Bionic Woman. And NBC produced and aired two of the three $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman reunion movies. The first one was titled The $6 Million Man, The Return of the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman, which aired on May 17th, 1987. And then on April 30th, 1989, the second and final NBC Bionic reunion aired, titled Bionic Showdown, with Sandra Bullock. It was one of her first roles, if not the first role that introduced her to audiences. And I'm sure that's a role she would she'd rather forget. She probably wishes they could burn the print of that. I don't know. I can't get in her head, but a lot of these actors that really improved their talent and their gifts as an artist, sometimes they frown on some of their earlier work. I don't know why that would be, but some do. And I can't speak for Sandra Bullock. By the way, I have an autographed picture I've mentioned on the Podblast before of Richard Anderson, whom I first met in July 2005 at the Western Film Fair. I meant to mention this to Mr. Johnson, but let me just quickly tell you, I saw him. I got there a little early, and he was sitting at the restaurant of the hotel in Charlotte. And I got to talk with him. I gave him a business card, and I told him, hey, I'm in advertising sales. And he said this to me a couple times when I met him in 05, 06, and 07. At least 2 times I remember him telling this story. And he told it on stage, too, but he told me in private. He says, an actor has to sell himself. An insurance salesman sells insurance, but an actor has to sell himself. Not that was interesting, and he's right. That was something he said routinely, as an actor has to sell himself, and he certainly was successful at selling himself, starring in those 2 primetime shows, The $6 Million Man and The Bionic Woman, at the same time, and even when they're on separate networks, as Mr. Johnson said. So... Oh, I didn't talk about the outtake. Yeah, the reason I brought up the blooper reel at all of the Bionic Woman, which is hilarious, and that's another reason to buy the Bionic Woman from Shout Factory on Blu-ray, or the $6 Million Man on Blu-ray and Shout Factory, or the Incredible Hulk available from Universal in Blu-ray, is that these gag reels in many instances are on there as a supplemental bonus, and so you can see them in great quality, or the best quality possible. And they're a lot of fun. It's a great, great little bonus. Another cool thing about the Bionic Woman Blu-ray from Shout Factory is they found and located, this was not easy to do, the original network Next Week promo. And what's cool about that is it sometimes will be alternate takes, or there'd be alternate music, or different sound effects, or no sound effects, or just raw audio. It's very interesting. And usually they'd be about 30 seconds long, sometimes 60 seconds long. But they went into the vaults of the network of ABC, and they've restored them and placed them on the Blu-ray, which is really, really, really cool, I think. So, the final Bionic Woman and $6 Million Man reunion movie aired on CBS, not NBC, CBS, and the working shooting title was Bionic Breakdown, which they retitled Bionic Ever After, easy for me to say. And in that, Colonel Steve Austin finally married the Bionic Woman, Jamie Summers. And when she was brought back from the dead, using cryogenics in the return of the Bionic Woman season 3 premiere, $6 Million Man, it was explained that she suffered brain damage, which affected her memory. And supposedly in the first reunion movie from 1987, it was written in the story, her memory has returned, and thus she can remember her love for Steve Austin. And so that set up what finally happened on November 29th, 1994 in Bionic Ever After. So I'm going to play a 30-second clip of Lindsay Wagner talking about her fans specifically of the Bionic Woman that I had pulled for you now. Bear with me. Where are you, my little friend? There you are. Let's listen.
I get to see the child in all people who come up to me because they all grew up with me. So their relationship to my character, to Jamie Summers, to how they knew me the most. I mean, a lot of people love my movies and my television movies and all that, miniseries. But there's that little kid in there that never forgot being a child and spending their evenings with Jamie Summers. So when they see me, no matter whether they're like in a business suit or a biker and all of a sudden they're 6 years old and they're smiling, and I get to see like the best of people. So that's really fun for me.
That's from Daily Mail UK. Thank you for the use of that clip. A couple interesting things about Lindsay you may not realize. She's dyslexic. Now, this is all based on interviews that I've read. I don't know this through firsthand information. So if it's not true, please don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you what I read. And I read that she was dyslexic. And so that makes it really hard to have to study scripts and get it right. And it just shows how talented that she is to be able to do that with that disability. Pretty incredible stuff. So let's pivot to the Incredible Hulk really quickly. The Incredible Hulk, the next very successful, iconic television show that the great Kenneth Johnson created for television and wrote and directed and produced. Began on CBS, as you heard, and as you probably know, as a 2-hour television movie special on Friday, November 4th, 1977. And then just a few weeks later, on November 27th, 1977, a second 2-hour movie aired on CBS with the Incredible Hulk titled A Death in the Family. Now, Ken Johnson directed the pilot, the 2-hour original one, and Alan J. Levy, I'll call him Levy, directed A Death in the Family, which was the first one to feature the iconic opening title sequence, which was narrated, by the way, by Ted Cassidy. That She-Hulk parody was awesome. They did a great job. And actually, I cried. I hate to admit it. When that came on, because I'm such a fan of the original Incredible Hulk series, thanks in large part to Ken Johnson and Bill Bixby's acting. By the way, Bill Bixby, this haunts me to this day. He passed away on my birthday in 1993, which sucks. And every birthday I think about him because his acting really, really moved me, and that humanity that Ken Johnson put into his scripts. Amongst the violence, there was always a deep, deep story, and there was tenderness, and it was always satisfying. There was always a payoff, too, in all of Ken Johnson's productions, big and small. There was always a payoff in that final act that rewarded you for spending your time watching that television show or reading that book. There's also a payoff in his novels as well. By the way, the success of those television movies in terms of ratings for CBS, of course, led to a weekly hour-long television series titled The Incredible Hulk, which debuted on March 10th, 1978 as a weekly series, Friday nights at 9 p.m. initially. I love how production order of episodes varies from the network aired order, and usually that's because of when the special effects and post-production were completed, or sometimes it's just because an executive thought, this is a powerful episode, let's save it. Like, for instance, there was an episode titled A Child in Need of the Incredible Hulk shot during season 1 that didn't air until season 2. It was about child abuse. Sally Kirkland was in it. The Hulk had a lot of great guest stars. Kim Cattrall, Sherman Hemsley. I meant to interject when the subject of live theater came up, when Ken Johnson was talking about his love and passion for live theater. Sherman Hemsley also started in live theater. And, he made it as an actor rather late in life with All in the Family playing George Jefferson. But prior to that, he'd done live theaters. And that's where Norman Lear discovered him, was when he saw a stage production that Sherman Hemsley was in. And Sherman Hemsley acted on The Incredible Hulk. It was one of the few things he did outside of the Jeffersons while it was on the air. He guest starred and he shaved off his mustache in a season 2 episode. And just so many wonderful guest stars. We'll talk about more. And one, I'm about to mention, won an Emmy in an episode, such a tragic, well-done, deep episode titled Married, a 2-hour episode, the season 2 premiere of The Incredible Hulk. And I'll talk about that in a minute. It was set in Hawaii. But let me just get back to the history here of The Incredible Hulk. Yeah, like I said, it debuted March 10th, 78, Friday nights at 9. But for a brief time, CBS moved the Hulk to Wednesday nights at 8 in January 1979, just for that month only. I thought that was weird. And I remember I was like 8 years old, and I'm like, where's the Hulk on Friday night? And just for a while, it was on Wednesday night. And I guess the ratings didn't do well. I didn't research that. I'm sure that's the case because after January 79, in February, for Sweeps Week, suddenly it was back to Friday night, but not at 9 p.m., at 8 p.m. this time. And the reason I talk about production order varying from aired order was I was going to mention that I think the first episode produced for the weekly hour-long Incredible Hulk was one that Ken Johnson directed, Terror in Times Square. And you'll see a lot of great production stills online of Ken in Times Square with Lou Ferrigno directing him. And just look up some interviews with Ken Johnson where he talks about filming that. There's plenty out there on YouTube. And and I think he talks about it in the A&E biography of Bill Bixby, if I'm not mistaken. But he tells some great stories about that. And then the other thing I was going to mention about production order varying was, to my knowledge, All right, season 5 was only a handful of episodes, and it aired in the 81-82 season, but I think all of those episodes were shot during the 4th season of The Hulk. And just like with A Child in Need, the child abuse episode being withheld that was shot during season 1 aired in season 2, I think, according to a production order list, which may have been wrong, but I think it's right, the last regular episode of the classics hour-long weekly series, The Incredible Hulk, was the first parts 1 and 2, which had an old man Hulk versus Lou Ferrigno's Hulk and Dr. David Banner's Hulk. And the guy who played Swamp Thing, Dick Durock, played this old man Hulk. And an actor named Harry Towns played the human version of the quote-unquote old man Hulk. And according to the production codes that I saw, those were the last 2 episodes filmed of the classic series. Dun, dun, dun. No, I'm just kidding. It's not even that big. Dun, dun, dun. I think this stuff's interesting. So, but they did move it again in that 81-82 season. At the very end of the CBS primetime run, the Hulk was moved yet again to Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. And that was from May until June of 1982. The last all-new episode of the Bill Bixby, Lou Ferrigno, Jack Colvin, who played the investigative reporter Jack McGee, of that version in that series of the Hulk, that version of the Hulk aired on May 12th, 1982. Altogether, 79 one-hour episodes were filmed, along with 3 two-hour movies, which included the pilot, the second TV movie, and the 2-hour special season 2 premiere that Ken Johnson wrote and produced and directed, titled Married. I'm going to play a little bit of the theme to The Incredible Hulk while I get some more coffee, because I love this music. I played it before on the Podblast. This is by Joe Harnell, and he was recognized with a nomination by the Academy for his music on The Incredible Hulk. And he also did the music for Cliffhangers that I talked about, the short-lived Cliffhanger show on NBC. He just created, I did it again, almost another pun, no pun intended, incredible music for that show. Let me play a little bit of this music. It's just a minute long. This is the version of the theme that was scored for the second TV movie titled A Death in the Family from November 1977. And this is the music they used in the She-Hulk season 1 finale in the opening. I just like that. It just evokes so many memories of that show. And then here's how the narration sounded. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but as you know, the narrator was the great Ted Cassidy, who passed in 1979 due to a heart condition. And this is just a few seconds of what you just heard, but with his narration.
Dr. David Banner, physician, scientist, searching for a way to tap into the hidden strengths that all humans have. Then an accidental overdose of gamma radiation interacts with his unique body chemistry. And now when David Banner grows angry or outraged, a startling metamorphosis occurs.
just wanted to play that because I really liked She-Hulk, but whoever narrated the parody of the Incredible Hulk intro, they did an all right job, but I wish I'd gotten someone with near close to the pipes of Ted Cassidy. Now, I know it's a parody. It doesn't need to be exactly the same. That's just a very minor complaint because I really enjoyed She-Hulk, and I know a lot of people are probably yelling at the screen right now or yelling at your speaker, "You're an idiot! She-Hulk was crap!" I disagree. It was a comedy, and I thought it was very creative, and I liked it. So let's get serious and talk about the Emmy Awards. Oh my gosh. Okay, yes. So I talked about the Bionic Woman Emmy Awards. Let's talk about the Incredible Hulk, which had several nominations and wins. And I want to just cue up a clip. Here we go. That I'm going to play in a second. So, by the way, the Incredible Hulk pilot was released theatrically in Europe. And I think other places as well around the world. And so did this, Married, which I think was titled The Bride of the Incredible Hulk. That was the title for the theatrical release. And it was set in Hawaii. And in the story, David Banner gets married. And he marries a character, Dr. Carolyn Fields, played by Mariette Hartley. And a lot of you may remember Mariette Hartley from the Polaroid commercials with James Garner, the great James Garner. From, of course, Maverick and the Rockford Files, among other things, as well as movies. And people thought they were a real married couple, which I thought was really, really a testament to how great their chemistry was in those commercials for Polaroid instant cameras. So I want to talk about some Emmy nominations. The reason I played that music was I wanted to mention that there was a great nomination for Outstanding Achievement in Music Composition for a Series, Dramatic Underscore, in 1982 for Joe Harnell for his work on The Incredible Hulk. Also, Outstanding Cinematography for a Series in 1980, nominated for The Incredible Hulk. But it won, or actually Mariette Hartley won at the Sunday, September 9th, 1979 Emmy Award presentation. She won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Drama Series for a continuing or single performance. And she won for The Incredible Hulk. And hey, part of that credit must go to Kenneth Johnson because he inspired that performance. I mean, of course, it's natural talent on Mariette's part. I'm not taking anything away from that. I think it's a collaboration is all I'm trying to say. And that Married 2-hour episode, which was the season 2 premiere episode, aired on September 23rd, 1978. And there was all sorts of cool stuff in there where she's using hypnotherapy, her character, Dr. Carolyn Fields, to try to keep Banner calm so he doesn't transform. And she's got a terminal disease, so there's a tragic ending where she dies in the Hulk's arms, and then he slowly metamorphosizes back into Dr. David Banner. It's just a very touching scene. I'm going to play a 30-second trailer to that Married episode, and then we'll move on. But it's one of the best episodes of the series, and again, it's really, really deep. And who also is in that cast in a very minor role is Mino Police. You've seen this kid in everything. He was in Voyagers, and he played a little boy on the beach. And he's Soleil Moon Frye's older brother, who, of course, played Punky Brewster. Anyway, and she had breast reduction surgery that she publicly talked about in People magazine years later. Just a little factoid there. Let's listen to how the audio sounds for the trailer, which, by the way, when the Hulk was released on DVD, they didn't play this trailer. There's like a 30-second trailer, which essentially was the next week trailer, but it wouldn't have this is Bill Bixby. Here's some exciting scenes for the next episode of The Incredible Hulk. They wouldn't have that. It would just have the scenes themselves, but it would precede the opening credits in the original network run. And sometimes in reruns, the trailer will be in there. And this trailer was missing from the DVD, which irked me. But it's on the Blu-ray. Let me just play a little bit of this audio.
I, David, take thee, Carolyn, to be my wedded wife. We can win the battle against this disease. With hypnotherapy therapy could control that.
We're going to have to build up slowly until we reach an image that's strong enough for you to hold on to.
Carol! Carol! With this ring, I thee win.
That's the end of the music that I screwed up at the very beginning of this Podblast while I was struggling to go live. And I was just preparing all of this we're going over now, which is why I was a little late, which is very rude to a big-time guest like Kenneth Johnson, even though it was just a few minutes still. I effed up. Anyway, Mariette Hartley also worked with Bill Bixby years later in a sitcom on CBS titled Good Night Beantown. That's Good Night Beantown, which lasted for 18 episodes between April 3rd, 1983 until January 15th, 1984. And they were good friends. Now, a little personal story about when I met Mariette Hartley in 1989. This is super inappropriate of me. It's not on a sexual nature or anything like that. Where I went to high school, someone had, this is very serious, had committed suicide. A male student had committed suicide when his girlfriend broke up with him. And it was really sad. And to help us cope with the grieving process, Mariette Hartley came to our school to talk about it. And like, it was like in the gymnasium where you'd have a pep rally. It was like kind of like a town hall, open mic situation. And she took questions from everybody. So they pretty much already covered all the serious, soothing aspects of it, which was the intention of her appearance there. But of course, I raised my hand and I said, Mrs. Hartley, I have a question. Yes. What was it like to work with Bill Bixby? You could hear a pin drop when I asked that question, folks. And I heard some gasps and like, oh my God, you know, and they were right. You know, it was inappropriate in that setting. And she goes, well, he was lovely and we're friends to this day. That was her response. So I asked that question back in 1989 when I was a senior in high school. I just wanted to know. So, some of my favorite guest stars, I already mentioned some. I already mentioned Kim Cattrall. Here's another good character actor, Robert Donner. A lot of you that watched Mork and Mindy will remember him as Exodore. He played this like hell-bent, like ultra-religious, hard-ass psycho in a Hulk episode titled Sideshow. Kim Cattrall, mentioned her, best known from Porky's and Sex and the City. The Howling Girl, she was in a very good episode, Kindred Spirits, I think from season 2. Faye Grant, whom Kenneth Johnson would hire for V, his epic miniseries we talked about. She was in an episode titled Slaves, where this black guy's enslaving white folks in a mine to dig for gold, I think it was, or treasure, some sort of money. I think it was gold. Gerald McRaney, he was in the Death in the Family second movie, but also he was in a movie called Death Mask, where he played like this cop who was a serial killer. He was a schizo, and he was killing women. And it was a really chilling episode for a Hulk. And then Brenda Bonet in the one that Ken and I talked about, written by Harris and Sherman. And it's called The Psychic, in which she plays a psychic that can predict the future. And she's going to commit suicide. Or she's going to prevent Banner from committing suicide. And then she attempts suicide as well at one point in the story. And it's ironic because she in real life soon thereafter committed suicide over immense guilt over the loss of her son. Supposedly what I read and what I saw in biographies is they were on a trip in Colorado and she left his medicine behind. And so she blamed herself for his death and she shot herself in the head. Terrible thing. And Tammy Bruce, who's like a pundit on cable news, she was there. She was allegedly friends with Brenda Bonet, and she actually was there that fateful, terrible, terrible night. But God, I didn't mean to get on a dark note there. But I have a 16mm film print of that episode, Psychic, and just when you know the true story, it makes you appreciate that one a little bit more. But let's get back to the light side of things. So after CBS canceled The Incredible Hulk, and I've heard Mr. Johnson say it was a relatively new executive at CBS that made that ridiculous decision because the ratings were still good for the Hulk. But for whatever reason, they scrapped it, and it had to wait about 6 more years for the Hulk to return to TV. But these were hit and miss, mostly miss television movies that NBC produced and aired, starting with The Incredible Hulk Returns in 1988, which introduced Thor, by the way. But the only good thing I can say, along with Bill Bixby's solid acting, was that they brought back Jack Colvin as Jack McGee in that story. And it aired on Sunday, May 22nd, 1988. Gonna play an original NBC preview trailer to that. This is brief. I think it's only a few seconds long, 30 seconds. Just so you can get a sense of what this sounded like. Let me get that audio going for you here. Here it is. The Incredible Hulk Returns. Bear with me as we're live. You're listening to the Nostalgic Podblast.
Maggie Shaw, it was the love.
Here it is.
When David Banner met Maggie Shaw, it was the love they'd both been looking for. But she didn't know his secret. She didn't know that his danger would become her danger. Their life together was threatened. David Banner had been pushed too far.
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
He's mean and green, and after 6 years, the Hulk will face his greatest challenge ever. Because this time, he's fighting for love. Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno are the Incredible Hulk in The Incredible Hulk Returns.
At the time, I liked it. I mean, the fact that the Hulk was back, but I don't like what they did with the makeup for Lou Ferrigno. They made him look different. I mean, I guess they thought they were advancing the makeup, but I didn't care for it. I didn't care for that makeup. And then in 1989 came The Trial of the Incredible Hulk, which also attempted to spin off
David Banner wanted to end
a different character. This time it was Daredevil. Actually, this was not a bad movie. Rhys Davis was in it, best known as Salah in the Indiana Jones universe. And he played Kingpin in this movie, The Trial of the Incredible Hulk, which aired on Sunday, May 7th, 1989. Let's listen to the 30-second intro trailer to that TV movie reunion.
David Banner wanted to end the running. He wanted to live in peace.
You have to stop someplace.
But once again, they made him angry. Maybe angry enough to kill.
Maybe I belong in a cage.
Now, imprisoned, he will struggle to hide the fury within him. But he will not succeed.
I can't stand trial. You have no choice.
Because now David Banner faces his greatest trial. The trial of the Incredible Hulk.
Next on NBC. So you had that, and then finally, this was the biggest insult of all. The way that The Incredible Hulk ended. There were some aspects of this movie that were not bad, but just the ultimate ending was not the way that any fan with a heart wanted it to end. The title of this was The Death of the Incredible Hulk. And it hit NBC airwaves back on Sunday, February 18th, 1990. I'm going to play a little bit of that promo, and then we're going to start to pivot towards other things, including V and Alien Nation really briefly, but just a couple more things to say about The Incredible Hulk. Let me get you this clip here now. Yeah, here's the Death of the Incredible Hulk trailer. Let me see if I can get this to go real quick. And it's got the original NBC intro. Uh-oh. Got a problem, but I'll fix it right now. Here it is. There it is. Sorry about that.
The second half of an NBC Sunday double feature.
For 12 years,
put your hands behind your head.
I battled the beast within me, and I want to destroy it and be human again. At last, my fight for freedom is over.
But if he destroys the Incredible Hulk, will he also destroy David Banner?
There is a chance I can rid you of this thing.
And now, NBC presents a world premiere event.
Please, no!
The end of a superhero legend.
No!
The death of the Incredible Hulk.
on positive aspect of it was there was a little bit of a storyline where David Banner's feigning that he's mentally challenged as a janitor so he can gain access to a lab. And I thought that was cool. He's like, did you bring me some carrot cake? It was just kind of cool. And Bill Bixby, his acting was just so great. He did a show called The Magician, too. It didn't last long, maybe one season in the early 70s. That was cool. The Courtship of Eddie's Father. Of course, My Favorite Martian. And they brought back Ray Walston, another great guest star in The Incredible Hulk, in My Favorite Magician early on in season 3. Mackenzie Phillips, who had substance abuse problems, did the season 3 premiere episode Metamorphosis, which took place during rock concerts, and there's a cool effect of it holds up to this day of the Hulk with lightning bolts from the stage effects going in between him. It was kind of a cool effect. But what I liked about Bill Bixby is when he was just so good at emoting, and I liked when he would yell, and they would make his voice deeper. That was probably done in post where he transformed. He'd go, "No, no!" I just like that. I know I sound like a nutball. I am. But he's like, "No, no!" I don't know. I like that. I thought that was just a subtle thing that Bixby did so great and so convincingly. I remember in high school, not to make it about me, I used to pretend I fell down some stairs, and that I was turning into the Hulk. It was so stupid, but I did that. But I did pretty good stunts back then when I was younger, falling down steps, and my inspiration was Bill Bixby's Stuntman. Another good episode, I've got to just mention a couple keys, was another Ken Johnson written and directed episode, the season 4 2-part premiere. It wasn't a 2-hour episode, it was a 2-parter, and called Prometheus, where a huge chunk of a meteorite asteroid comes down on Earth and it emits gamma radiation and it affects Banner. Banner gets close to it and he's stuck halfway between the transformation. Remember that one? That was cool with makeup, and Rick Drasnan, I think, did the stunt man. He was a stuntman, and he played the midway between David Banner, who had muscle, right? So, but he wasn't green. He was flesh colored, but that was a really, really strong script. And they brought back this actress, Lori Prang, for that, playing a blind woman. And she had been in Death in the Family in a totally different character, playing the Pan-American heiress of that airline corporation. So those are just some great episodes. I could go on and on. I'm going to do a Podblast about The Incredible Hulk. You've been warned about my favorite episodes, or maybe I'll just make it about Ken Johnson shows, or I'll come up with something. But want to mention that the Hulk hit the big screen years later after the 1990 death of the Incredible Hulk. Had nothing to do with the television show, obviously, but Ang Lee from Crouching Tiger directed the live-action movie Hulk, which was released on Friday, June 20th, 2003, which starred Eric Bana, B-A-N-A, Bana, like Banner in a way, back on Friday, June 13th. Friday, June 20th, 2003. And then, now this was more in line with the television show, but not really. But it was more Ken Johnson Hulk friendly, was the movie The Incredible Hulk, which was released on Friday, June 13th, 2008, starring Ed Norton as David Banner this time. And they actually showed a little bit of an homage to the opening credits of the classic Incredible Hulk series, which was all taken from pilot footage that Ken Johnson shot in, I think it was May of 1977, but it aired November 4th, 1977. Let's move on to this epic television series and project by Ken Johnson. Let me just get it here. This clip. I was struggling to pull all these clips in time, but let's listen to a little bit of this teaser trailer to V, the original miniseries.
Tonight is your chance to see how it all began, to relive the excitement that is V, the most extraordinary miniseries ever. A daring TV journalist struggling to uncover the startling truth behind the aliens' visit to Earth. And a beautiful and brave young scientist fighting for the very survival of the human race. Together, they take you on a fantastic journey to meet the visitors. Prepare yourself for a television event that's out of this world. Prepare for V. Next.
It was great, and Jane Badler was so beautiful as the villain. the villainous Diana. Just epic casting, and I like how Ken Johnson brought back the same talents. A lot of actors that did a good job for him before. You heard him. A lot of people behind the scenes, and Joe Harnell, who did the music of the Incredible Hulk and Bionic Woman. Ken brought him back for V. And let's listen to a little bit of that score as I talk about V. And we're wrapping up this edition of the Nostalgic Podblast here. Let's listen to some of the theme music to V. Any day now. You're listening to the Nostalgic Podblast. Stuff. It goes on a little bit, but in the interest of time, let me stop that clip. Actually, I'll just tell you that as that plays, that V, the original miniseries, written, produced, and directed by Kenneth Johnson, aired on NBC on Sunday, May 1st, my mother's birthday, and Monday, May 2nd, 1983. And there's a really sad story that some of you may not know, a lot of you do, that happened, a real-life tragedy. An actress named Dominique Dunn was cast in V, the original miniseries, and she had just been in Poltergeist, the movie. She was the big sister in Poltergeist. And a crazed ex-boyfriend strangled her to death while she was rehearsing with one of her co-stars. Wow. And they actually filmed a couple shots of her, and one shot exists where the ship lands in the neighborhood and you see her from behind. Ken Johnson's talked about that before. And they had to recast, and they recast ill-fated Dominique Dunn. Just a terrible, terrible story there. Speaking of just quick shots and recasting, I should have mentioned this previously. We're talking about the Hulk and the Incredible Hulk pilot. Did you know that Richard Kiel was originally cast to play the Incredible Hulk? I'm talking about the actor who played Jaws in the James Bond movies. And he was in the Wild Wild West in the 1960s as the henchman of Loveless. Miggly Loveless, the little guy. And anyway, you know Jaws, though, from The Spy Who Loved Me, James Bond movie, and Moonraker with the Steel Teeth. That's Richard Kiel. And he's really tall and lanky and kind of thin. And someone decided we need a little more muscle. So there's just one shot that remains of Richard Kiel as the Incredible Hulk. and that's where he's trying to save this little girl from drowning, who's fishing with her dad, and you see a bird's eye shot from a crane, where the camera was probably on a crane. I don't know. I should ask Ken Johnson, but it's an overhead shot, and that's Richard Keel. So one quick shot remains, and actually, if you listen to Ken Johnson's commentary on the Incredible Hulk Blu-ray or DVD, he points out the shot, and you can actually see it. I'm telling you, he does the best informative commentaries I've ever heard. Some of the best commentaries on the V Blu-ray set available from Warner Home Entertainment, the Incredible Hulk Blu-ray set available from Universal, and the Bionic Woman and the $6 Million Man series collections available in HD for the very first time starting in 2022, thanks to Shout Factory. And I recommend all of those programs for your kids, grandkids, or for yourself to relive. It's all great stuff. Now, the fourth and final Ken Johnson project is one that Ken proudly mentioned, Alien Nation, which was based on the motion picture. And Alien Nation began as a television entity on Fox on September 18th, 1989. It ended as a weekly series on May 7th, 1990. But a new executive rescued Alien Nation and brought it back as a series of successful television movies. And the first TV movie aired on October 25th, 1994. The next Alien Nation all-new TV movie aired a year later on October 10th, 1995. Then another movie for Alien Nation aired on January 2nd, 1996. Also November 12th, 1996. And then finally, Alien Nation concluded a series of all-new 2-hour television movies on July 29th, 1997. So I just want to, again, as we conclude here, give props and thanks to the great Kenneth Johnson. A real feather in my cap to be on my little show, I got to say. And I sure hope whether I'm a part of it or not, I really want to see Ken Johnson's vision of V be made as a reboot. I guess Warner's owns the rights. I'll have to research that. Now, I want to remind you, pun intended, of a special deal from our friends at Remind Magazine. If you're here listening or watching this program, chances are you're into nostalgia. Well, you're going to love this magazine if you're into nostalgia. They cover everything from the 1950s through the 1990s. Each issue has dozens of brain-teasing puzzles, trivia quizzes, comics, and all sorts of fun. And the best part is it comes to you in the mail each and every month, just like the good old days when you subscribe to your favorite magazine. You can give a whole year of Remind Magazine right now for a limited time for only $12 for the entire year. Not $12 a month like a streaming series, a streaming service would charge. No, I'm talking about for the entire year. What can you get for $12 these days with inflation going through the roof? I'm afraid this deal won't last long with inflation climbing as it is, as we're live here towards the end of 2022. But let me tell you how to order Remind. We're trying to get back to the happy days, no pun intended, the good times of getting something fun in the mail. And how about for a birthday or holiday gift? The holidays are upon us as we're live here in November, towards the end of November 2022. So why not give Remind Magazine for only $12? And you know what? Your gift recipient will think you spent a hell of a lot more than just $12. Go to remindmagazine.com. They accept any credit card, or you could call old school toll free at this phone number. Are you ready? 855-773-6463. That's 855-773-6463. And an order specialist will assist you in processing your Remind subscription for that $12. Makes a great gift. So I just want to, again, thank everybody for tuning in. And listen to Ken Johnson. If you tuned in late, play it back and just listen to every word. Make yourself a drink, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic, and you'll learn a lot, especially if you love movies and television shows like we all do. I think you'll really dig it. He was just exceptional, and I'm very grateful to him. And check out his book, Holmes Coming, like Sherlock Holmes. It's not a dirty book. It's not an adult book. Holmes Coming. I have a dirty mind. I'm thinking of Holmes, the adult star. Okay, I had to inject a little attempt at humor. Very inappropriate. Forgive me. No, this is a thriller, a crime drama. Let me read you a little synopsis here. I didn't do that before. Let me read you, as we sign off, a synopsis of what this book is about. Headline: The genius reappears, but is the 21st century ready for him? Here's a synopsis from Amazon of this book, Holmes Coming by Kenneth Johnson. Dr. Amy Winslow tells the story in a foggy nighttime San Francisco. A jogging San Francisco Police Department captain is savagely attacked by a Bengal tiger, which then vanishes into thin air. In her emergency room, Amy labors unsuccessfully to save the captain's life, then consoles his aggrieved closest friend, Lieutenant Luis Ortega. Neither suspects their lives will intertwine in a life or death mystery. The next day, checking on former patient Mrs. Hudson at her Victorian house, isolated in Marion County's forest, Amy discovers in the cellar a secret cobweb-covered 1899 electrochemical laboratory containing a Jules Verne-esque steampunk sarcophagus, out of which springs a wild-eyed, half-mummified crypt keeper who injects himself with something before falling dead at her feet. Amy barely revives him. He claims to be the real-life Victorian master chemist and detective named Holmes, who allowed Conan Doyle to write stories based on his cases. Amy assumes he's a lunatic, and his Scotland Yard identity papers were stolen while he slept. So it takes her a while to realize that his amazing story is true. So this story, it's like, it's a romance as well as a mystery and a crime drama. And it sounds like something out of H.G. Wells, mixed with the real mystery, and hopefully, maybe, we'll see a little bit of Jack the Ripper in this. I don't know. I'm just saying. So just check it out if you can. Anywhere fine books are sold, go to Amazon and check out Holmes Coming. So grateful for everybody tuning in. We'll catch you next time on the Nostalgic Podblast. Have a great week. I'm sure if Ken hears how I mangled my interpretation of that synopsis of his book, he's going to rescind that offer. Have a good one, folks.